We're going to go over what's new in Bootstrap 4. And once we go through a listing of some of the new features, the more popular ones, I'm going to jump out. We'll go to the browser, go to the Bootstrap website, and take a look at some of the documentation there so you'll know where to find some of this as well and see a few examples. Now, as we go through the course, we're also going to see examples of Bootstrap 4 features in action as we build up our different projects. So one of the main things is that they've added Flexbox, which is CSS3 flexible box, and it's used a lot with the grid. So what it does is allow you to accomplish more kind of popular layout and complex layout easily. So if you were trying to do the same thing in CSS, it would be a little more difficult and challenging, but we're going to see Flexbox really helps make your different kinds of layout that you want to achieve a lot easier to do. Also, they've replaced less with Sass, so we see some examples of Sass and how to make use of it, how to compile it and get it into our CSS. Now, some of the JavaScript has been rewritten in ES6 so that it has the latest standards and a lot of compatibility, good performance as well. And this relates to some of their plugins that they use that has JavaScript, and then other different areas of JavaScript have also been updated. They've added cards and font awesome, so we're going to take a look at cards in a little bit and see how those are used. And then they had the glyphs, some of the fonts that were being used, and those now are being replaced with font awesome. There's a new grid tier for smaller devices, so at 576 and below. So some of the grid columns and different ways to access grid layout have changed. So when we go to the website, we're going to see some of the mentions of those changes. Also, Tether is a JavaScript utility that they're using for UI placement and tooltips, so we'll see how Tether integrates. It's actually a call at the bottom of your main page. So we saw in our index.html where we had the 3 references for JavaScript. So we had jQuery and Tether. Then below that, we had the Bootstrap JavaScript reference, which needs to go last because it does depend on the other 2. Okay, what we're going to do now is go into the browser. We're going to take a look firsthand at some of these new features. So here I'm on the migrating to Bootstrap 4 documentation page. So if you go to documentation, you'll get several things over here on the left, and then migration is right here. So they're going to go through and talk a lot about the different changes. So as we go through here, you can also see the browser support that is going on now. So they've dropped all the way up to IE9, and then there's mobile browser support in here as well. So here's some of the big changes. Flexbox is enabled by default, so they're getting away from things like floats here. You can see they switched from less to Sass for CSS. And another thing here is they're favoring realms instead of PX. PX is still being used, but there's a lot more move towards realm. And the global font size has increased to 16 from 14, so that's kind of interesting. Probably has a lot to do with accessibility as you get more screens with Retina and different things like that. And you can see here also mentioning about the smaller devices for 576. There's been some renaming of those grid components, so you'll see some of these like this that you can see here. This is quite big, so you can kind of change some of these together. And let's see if we go down a little bit more. The grid system, this gets involved. This really, we're going to see a lot of this in action, but these are the updates to the grid system. So use of Flexbox, the use of the new attribute naming that they've got going on inside of it as well. And if I scroll down, we can go to components here, and you'll see they've dropped the glyphicons, and here's font awesome. There's a few other things here that they've got, octagons, and we can see cards are here. So we're going to look at some of that. This is another look at Flex, just Flex in general. That's under Utilities Flex. If you want to look at this in more detail as to some of the examples that they have here, some of it is really nice with the complex layouts you can do. So you can see this kind of alignment that you can do. And scroll down a little bit more, not there, but there's some really complex. So this right here gets pretty involved, and as you shrink it, the browser, everything stays as it is. And there's a few others down here. Let's see. So these kinds of layouts, you can see this one right here is horizontally basically floating. It's aligned horizontally. So a lot of interesting layouts now. And so let's look at cards. This again is in components card. So we have, let's see, cards, and they give the introduction of what they are. So this is basically what they do. You can put an image up here at the top, then you can introduce something down here, a button, and it makes this kind of layout really easy. And let's see if they have a few. So here's a few more examples with just the text. You can add links there, and no button on that one. List. So a lot of different things you can do. This is a big one with all the different components in it. So that's what cards are. And on some websites you may see where they have a hero image and below it there's 3 different sections. A lot of the times they'll use a card that will look like this one here to introduce those 3 horizontally aligned boxes. Just gives it a really good layout. You can change, you can see they've got rounded. You can go a square if you want. So there's a lot of different things you can do there with customizations. Now we talked about tether, and if I go out to the documentation root, go to the quick start, actually right here, and let's see, I'm going to go to the starter template. Let's see, this one here is different. It's got some popper JS. We don't actually need to worry about that. Oh, and reboot, before we move to look at tether, it's kind of like where we had normalized before. So this is another different way to correct the inconsistencies across browsers. When you're starting a whole new section in your web page, you used to have to do normalize or clears to have the CSS above you not affect what you're doing. So reboot is kind of taking the place of that. All right, so let's look at tether here. This is the tooltips section, and that is, let's see, under components, you can see here. So that's where I'm at. And this is making use of tether for it to function. So if I scroll down, you can see here third-party tether, and that's tether min. And then they're going to show some examples. So here we are. You can see these, and you can see how you can just place them different areas and align them up however you want. The default is on the top, like this one here. So if you have some text, a paragraph of text, you can just highlight a word in there, and the tooltip will appear above it. There's a lot of customizations as to how you want it to look. So that is where you get a lot of use out of tether. So it's the tooltip, it's the way that it's laying out the tooltip, the positioning of that element. So that's what tether is going to help with. So that is a look at a lot of the main features. We're going to be going through pretty much all of those and more as we walk through our different projects.